Let me introduce myself first. My name is Morchin. You can call me Moshi. I'm a community manager at Artisan. I'm also a digital fashion designer, and also I'm a teaching at University of Hertfordshire, teaching fashion designs. Maybe we can start our conversation by give a little introduction of yourself across the room. Who you are, what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I can start if I'll start it or I'll kick it off. So thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here. My name is Irene Seelig. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AnimXR. We're a multiverse platform, cloud streaming an ecosystem of virtual immersive worlds. So we help brands and onboard them into the metaverse. We're all about brands owning their IP, bringing that into the metaverse. We're built on top of Unreal Engine 5. And yeah, we work with companies across the luxury fashion vertical as well as music and NFT artists. So we work with a number of brands, including Burberry and Farfetch, launched in 2021. We work with NFT artists like Fuck Render, if anyone is familiar. But yeah, we're onboarding a lot more this year, which is exciting. So yeah, glad to be here.
I can continue. Hi, my name is Anna Graf. I'm Director NFT for a marketplace named Misa.art, also for Gallery, König Gallery, where this marketplace originally comes from, which means we are a marketplace for art in general. We do not only do NFTs, but also fine art, prints, editions, and soon fractionalized ownership. So we work with artists like Rafik Anadol, but also well-known artists from Europe, like Erwin Wurm, who minted his first NFT with us. So we support artists who have not been in the NFT space to onboard them. Also, customers can buy with fiat. We have a Shopify shop, so that's really easy onboarding either way. And we want to democratize the art world by giving easy access to art to everybody who loves art. Thank you for having me.
I'm happy to jump in after that because democratizing the art world is also what got me excited about blockchain, so I'll continue on that thread. My name's Anne Bracegirdle, and my background is the traditional art world. So I was at Christie's for about a decade as a specialist, and in that capacity fell in love with blockchain in 2017 and decided that I wanted to commit to helping the industry understand how this technology will revolutionize the space. And so I've been involved in the digital art ecosystem since about that time, built out Christie's Art and Tech Summit, and then worked with Pace Gallery to build out Superblue, and have always been working on NFT initiatives in a side hustle capacity, but thankfully a year ago now this can be our day job, and so I now run business development for a company called Metaversal, and what we do is we essentially partner with brands to co-curate and produce NFT projects, really for the long term. And we also are forming an advisory team as well, and we have an investment part of our business. So we are actively collecting NFTs and becoming involved in those communities. So super excited to be here and be a part of this conversation.
Okay, me? Okay. Hi, I'm Jackie. My background is a long time ago fashion PR, and then I was sort of a startup founder with a resale business, a digital resale business called Nearly Newlywed, which was kind of like the real, or is kind of like the real for weddings. So I did that for about 8 years, and then once that was acquired a couple years ago, I got more into angel investing and advising, which is how I sort of got into the Web3 space to understand it from like a client and investment perspective. And then, really kind of fell in love with a lot of the things everyone else has sort of mentioned, the innovation, the community, and so started to join some things. So what I'm up to now is I'm a founding BFF at BFF. So the mission there is to, on like sort of like in a very broad, high level way, create more education and ease of access to onboard people into crypto, especially women and non-binary. And then I've been working on something called Qualia, which is sort of a DAO ecosystem. And like the snippet is, it's sort of like a Web3 LVMH. So we'll be launching with sort of like a distributed leadership group, a small community next month. And then we'll be sort of incubating and investing in things across art, fashion, and design.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the introduction. And we have the speakers coming from different background. I love that. I think we are going to focus about branding for crypto project today. And I think we are going to start our conversation by acknowledging the importance of branding for any project, even Web2 or Web3, right? So what is the most important or the strongest DNA for a successful crypto project? Anyone can chime in and...
Okay, I will just start because it's interesting. I also come from a branding background and know how important it is. And I also see that so many projects would be more successful if they had a better UI UX design. For the normal customer who is not into this cryptos NFT space, it's really a challenge to even focus on what they have to do next. So this is what we want to improve at Misa too, like the customer experience of making it simple in the buying process so that the customer knows what he or she has to do to finally get and find the product. And I think this is something where the art world also, like Anne said, she's from the traditional art space, can really set like a standard because we know how aesthetics worked. I personally was very disappointed from seeing all the galleries, except for Christie's, by the way, in New York, when I was at the NFT NYC, how poorly they really established their own brand. I was like super rare, wow, this is so high standard in Web3. And I went to the gallery and it was dirty. The frames were not in the right size, everything. Like these small things, they add on to your brand. And I think that most Web3 projects really have to realize that they have to go back to the real world and also set the standard very high because this is what people are expecting. And I think people like Anne and everyone here in this room can help set this standard also for the traditional world.
I'll add another one. Maybe we can each go around adding a certain element. I think another key point, I personally totally agree with Anna. Another key point is authenticity and transparency. I think that I'm sure that one of the reasons why we're all passionate about this space is because we're just really motivated by the fact that authenticity and genuine respect and kindness and being true to oneself and being transparent about ideas and plans and mistakes, it means a lot, and it builds a lot of community and a lot of goodwill. And so I think a lot of brands, or some people are diving in, number one, maybe not taking the time to get a sense of really what the community is all about and recognizing how much authenticity and transparency matters to get even known in the space. And then B, maybe launching something that isn't really tethered to your mission, your vision, who you are, right? I think I spend a lot of time advising artists, creators, brands to not try to put your square peg into the NFT round hole, but actually identify what it is about, what is the ethos behind your brand, your vision, your legacy, that we can use NFTs as a tool to expand and build upon that. So I always like to kind of try to bring people back to, what represents authenticity for themselves, and let's use that as a key point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. Oh, you want to go?
No, go for it.
It's the virtual way here. I agree with what everyone's saying. I think that, when you think about brand, it's just, sort of the identity of who you are and what you do and how anyone can participate in that. I think that there's different ways to convey it, right? A strong visual language, if it's something that's a little more artistic. But when you think about Web3, a lot of the things that we're talking about are the technologies that are powering these companies and brands. But still at the core, they are these living, breathing things. And so you want to be consistent and authentic. And I think where Web3 starts to, depart from maybe Web2 is that things around authenticity and transparency are more and more important. And I think with a brand, a successful brand, you always want your consumer, right? Your anyone that radiates from the brand to feel that they can identify with it or aspire to it. I think with Web3, it's even more kind of symbiotic. You want someone that really like deeply identifies with the brand. And so, you know, the exercises you would do in a traditional brand about who is your community, who are they, I think it's even more critical in Web3, because, you know, the community and your constituents are sort of even more personifying the brand and helping build it as you go. So they have to,
Yeah, I would say I'm echoing what Jackie was just saying, and then everyone else kind of touched on this point, is like the technology side too. I mean, typically in Web 2, we're thinking about traditional branding as being, you know, of course, the aesthetic and typography and how a brand is represented. With our company, we're also constantly thinking, of course, of like the whole UI and UX behind a brand's metaverse, and thinking about even to the point of navigation. In the early days when we launched in 2020, thinking about navigation was super important, even though we think about it as something super simple. But if someone can't even navigate the space, what does that say about the brand? And, you know, if they can't explore a space, you know, again, how are they going to kind of have that trust also into this new evolution of where the internet, I guess, or the 3D internet is headed, as well as like from a blockchain perspective. And then we also see from like the technology side, when it comes to like onboarding, exactly like, okay, are they going to be paying via fiat? How are they, you know, how are they going to engage? And, you know, I think this next evolution of where Web3 is going, and I think it's good that we're in this bear market, because it's giving a lot of people and brands and startups time to build a better infrastructure. Of course, like, you know, this all of this happens in stages, which is great. And I think right now it's a great time to be able to take the moment and say, okay, how can we bring on more people? How do we make this more mainstream? And I think it's just giving that moment to everyone to have that time on what is the best user experience. And I think we can all learn from each other. We work with a lot of different partners, and it's great speaking with them on the UX and UI strategy, and how can we start making that onboarding process so more seamless, so that blockchain actually kind of falls to the background. Because I mean, if we think about it, the internet and the cloud, everyone thinks the cloud is, you know, light fluffy cloud. A lot of people don't know what the cloud really is. You know, they don't realize it's a bunch of servers running. And so, you know, when the internet first came about, and also trying to get more and more people on, people weren't thinking like, you know, we used to have dial-up, and so we had to go through that whole process. And so this is, I think, a great moment for all of us to think about, how do we bring the technology, obviously have it, utilize it in the best way possible, but bring it more into the background, and let the products speak for themselves, and bring those more and more forward. So
this is so interesting, Irene.
It kind of incorporates a lot of different things, but
yeah, this is super interesting what you're saying, because I am speaking a lot also on panels, etc., and I do not even use the word NFT anymore at the moment.
Yeah.
I only speak about digital art, just like Meta has switched to digital collectibles, because also people, they speak of music, not of MP3. And I think this is what we have to realize. When I was talking to people, nobody was interested in NFTs, but everybody was interested in what the product really looks like. And this I have seen like throughout the space, also talking of asset classes as an investment, etc. It's about the product in the end, and not about the technology. Nobody really wants to know about the technology. They want a seamless onboarding. They want the product they love, like it has always been. And this is so interesting, because now looking back in history into what Web 2 really meant, or Web 1 even, we come from this read, write, to read, write, own. So it's just another step. It is not a revolution. To me, this is a lot more like an evolution. And the hype was just kind of hiding this evolutionary process, which we are already in. And I think the best results we'll see in 2 to 5 years. Also working on the brand side, I will now be moving to a large company where I will go into the Web3 strategy, and also see what it means for publishing, for TV, for all these different sectors, and that we really have to look closer into and make something exciting out of this. Because I see that, for example, circular economy will be totally a thing. And this is so Web3. We can do so much working with brands, art, and all these different stakeholders together and really go deeper into this creator economy. And this will be a win-win situation for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's excellent. Obviously, like you being an expert in the field, going into a company, a corporate company, and understanding too, like where across other mediums that it can be utilized or other verticals that it can be utilized. And again, having it fall more to the background. And I think it's good. I mean, obviously, in terms of like the evolution and getting people to understand. I don't know about everyone else on the panel, but we've had to change our branding several times. We're also in the process, and branding meaning like what is our tagline, right? Because before, when we launched in 2020, no one knew what the metaverse was. Now everyone knows what the metaverse is. So we were virtual experience, then metaverse, and now, again, we're kind of bringing that more to the background and talking more about virtual experiences, immersive experiences. So it is really interesting where things are headed, but I do agree in terms of like the time frame, 2 to 5 years is where we're really going to see how this is going to be powering the future.
Brilliant. So there are a lot of different Web3 projects in the space, and the space, to be honest, is quite noisy, right? Each project has their own unique approach towards branding. How do you see big crypto brands now? Are they built to last? Are they sustainable?
Oh my goodness, that's such a I mean, there's so many, so it's a hard thing to say. I don't know if I should even go first. I think some, for sure. It's like, I think that when you kind of zoom out from the space, I think that's kind of what Irene, I think, was saying before. Also, that when people think of NFTs or crypto projects that aren't involved in the space, they think of like a few very specific things and a few like specific use cases, like especially like some of the buzzier large cap collectibles. But I think that it's like any sort of evolution in innovation. There will be companies that will make it, and then there will be a lot that don't, because of how they execute, because of how they build. I think that you can kind of see, not just on the branding side, a lot of projects that are not really built to be sustainable companies. Sustainable companies take time to build an infrastructure. So I guess that's a long way of saying I think some will and many will not. Not because of the tech or because of Web3, just because of the nature of competition and execution.
And I fully agree with Jackie. And I think, again, we can just look into the past. 80% to 90% are not going to make it for sure. And this is but like the normal standard, because so many people just start without even having a plan because they see money is here. And in 2021, this was kind of the sad side of the whole space. So many rug pulls came up. And this is why we need the reputation of brands that already exist, that have already been existing, and that kind of guide us right now. And also when you see how Yuga Labs is developing, they are doing this with other brands together. So it's more of like a collaboration from both sides and growing together from the old world, from the new world. And then we see what new things we can achieve and what is happening in the space. So Yuga Labs for me is kind of the standard where we can look into, but there are more coming, and all the luxury brands that are now coming into the space, they are also looking for partners. They need developers. They don't have their own IT departments, etc., etc. So I think in the whole space, in this whole ecosystem, there's so much, sorry for the noise, there's so much room left for so many new companies that are still to come, that are developing now. I, for example, love the idea of token proof, who really solve the problem of how can I securely connect my wallet and prove my identity with an ape or whatever is in there. So I think we need a lot more of these solutions in the ecosystem, and these will be the brands that will survive and that are native to Web3.
I completely agree with Anna, and was also going to say the same thing, and using Yuga Labs as an example, that I think the NFT brands that recognize the importance of cross-collaboration, I think are going to probably just hopefully stand the test of time. And similarly with Web2 firms. I mean, think about like Adidas totally understanding the benefit of immediately collaborating with G Money, with Yuga Labs, now helping with WalkMe United. Like they immediately leapt on, like clung to that and realized, okay, well, the best way for us to succeed is to partner with people who are already doing this and who are NFT native. And so the space is so collaborative anyway. Like I think it was Jackie who said earlier, like we're all learning from each other. It's such a communal space anyway. And so the more that projects cross collaborate and have community support one another, the more success they're going to have. And so I think Yuga is a great example of a team that acknowledges that and is also diversifying their offerings in such a way that they're completely creating like a hybridization of culture as well. So we're not just pigeonholing ourselves into one particular cultural vertical, but they're appealing to such a wide audience. And that is, I think, one of the most exciting things about these projects as brands, right? They're not just pigeonholing into fashion, into music, right? Into art. We're just cross-pollinating what culture is. And so I think the brands that do that most successfully and partner strategically and carefully will have a better chance of surviving. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and I would just summarize that because I think everyone kind of touched on the points here is like really looking at partnerships, collaboration, because also, startups, if you try to solve all of the challenges within this space, you're going to be completely overwhelmed. So really pinholing, how are you going to partner, who you're going to partner with? And then second, I would say it's really about what is the challenge that you're really trying to solve? Like what is that issue that's happening, and then what are you delivering, and how that's being built out. So I think that will really kind of keep the companies in the space and be part of more of like that 20% who survive.
Oh, I would just add too, I think when you're thinking about like to bringing it back to also like the branding side, what we were kind of, I think all said already too, is that because of the transparency, of the blockchain and all of that, and sort of also just that's the expectation in the space, building in the open. I think that your partnerships, when you look at like, I don't know, the rise of things like how brands, there was this whole emergence of people that would help put like the right celebrities and stuff. And that's obviously still happening and in Web3. But I think that was a new way to give, additional texture and identity to a brand. And now I think that it is so much more sort of community based and sort of living and breathing. And so again, like because of the transparency, the partnerships that you do in a more meaningful way, further personify your brand, right? And there's this symbiosis going on between communities, which I think is super powerful, and it extends beyond just resources and like marketing reach. I think it really is also this co-branding sort of opportunity or thing happening.
And if I may add on this, because we were talking about these broad companies that really bring a lot of culture in there. In the same way, all the companies that start now, I would advise them to really find their niche. Because this we have seen in social media web 2 as well. Now really finding your niche where you are the absolute expert in your field will help you a lot gain attention in the space, also for partnerships, which is interesting, for example, for art, as you said, and for Christie's, etc. So I think a lot of companies that want to start now, I would say find your niche, do it very, very precisely, and then look for partners.
Are there any good examples of successful crypto brands with strong branding strategy? What makes them stand out?
I would say we've talked about Yuga Labs, but Artifact, and then being bought up by Nike, I think that was obviously a great partnership there. Couldn't have been better. It seemed like they were almost building it from day one to kind of have that exit strategy. But going back to community building, finding that niche, they really did a great job and honing all of that in. And then constantly knowing who their community is. Like, I think it's really important identifying who you really want that community to be, who are you going to be building out for, and what you're building for them. I think they do an excellent job across the board. When it comes to all their assets, they just released also their avatars in 3D, which is exciting for a lot of the collectors. And then they do really focus on this component of how can we utilize blockchain and Web3 to co-create together. So they released those 3D files so that they could start seeing as well that co-creation. How can they provide more tools for their community to co-create with them? And I think more and more as brands do that and become more, I don't know, willing to provide, like some of the luxury brands. I came from Stella McCartney and Swarovski, and the more and more like coming from Swarovski and just thinking about how different brands utilize their crystals across the board, it goes to the same point. The more and more that brands can, or startups, NFT artists can enable others to build, I think also that also helps from like a success standpoint, and then also building out that community.
One of my faves, around like the idea of letting other people build is Nouns DAO, or Nouns. I'm actually not a noun yet, but I use, because it's, CCO, right? I have a PFP with Nouns classes on it, but I think that they're, for what they want to achieve, right, and how they're sort of approaching IP and letting it be shared, is great. And they've created, I'm not even up to speed on all of it, but different moats for people to put projects forth, so that it doesn't, because they mint one a day and people can join, but it's very expensive. But then they've created these sort of subcultures, and then they have this, what I think is a very iconic element, which is the glasses. So I think that they've done a great job of, it's just one that I think is a really good example and very experimental in what they're trying to do, which I think is to be sort of applauded.
Also, I think about it's also important to think about the team behind a project that's launching, and thinking about how carefully and thoughtfully they launch a project. What I'm thinking about in particular is Proof Collective.
Yeah, I love Proof.
About the way that, of course, Kevin Rose being sort of the ambassador behind that project, but the way in which they launched that project, which led to such wild success with Moonbirds, and now building out all of their different proof of initiatives, I think will now be for now, is sort of the gold standard for building out these membership, like access passes. So that's just one I wanted to flag.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And I also think this comes back to what we were talking about before, like all this ecosystem that is now being built during this bear market, because we will see so much more utility in the whole space, also where people will not realize that it's based on Web3, but just use it as a proof, as a ticket for something. And I think that some projects also, my favorite project, 10KTF, is doing very, very well. I love the project because they do so many different things. It's just a very creative kind of space. And cuteness, number one for me, is doodles still. It's something that really shows that this whole space might be attractive for children. I know there's a disclaimer that it's not for children, and there's also, like, when I talk to brands, I always say, like, yeah, who are you addressing? We have to be careful with this because it's still a financial product. But it will be interesting to see how authorities work also on that, because when I see play to earn, these are basically children or teenagers that get into the space. So we also need structures from the company side that already does this whole process of taxes and whatsoever, so that the customer doesn't have to do it themselves. And this will be very interesting to see how Web3 companies deal with that.
But also one more thing, I think that a lot of the examples we've given, I think, are probably all like fairly big, in terms of financial success, in terms of community participants. They're like large projects. And I think that it's not exactly the same, but you do see like these micro communities more around individuals, predominantly, especially like in art. But that not every artist, right, is doing that. They don't need to. Art is utility. I do believe that. But some are, expanding how they, envision sort of the radius of sort of like their brand. One that I think is great is like BitGans and the BitGan universe with Pindar Arman. He's it's sort of like these AI, if you're not familiar, very iconic moving. It's sort of like a squiggle, but moving and sort of with it AI collab. But he's created a very small but very open source sort of community around sharing. And has different now projects like BitGan collabs and PodGans. And so I think that's a great example. I also think Sarah Mayohas with Bitcoin and sort of the way she's building out that and partnering with people are examples of, individuals with strong art IP that are building out, brands and collaborations in a really interesting way too.
I have a question for Irene. Since you're coming from luxury background, what's the most challenging thing for traditional luxury houses, fashion houses, to transition into Web3? Or are they just taking Web3 as a marketing strategy to monetize from this new opportunity?
Yeah, so I would say a great question because I deal with a lot of luxury brands and have worked with them in the past internally. And I think one of the biggest things, I mean, obviously luxury, we all know, their systems are a bit archaic. I was speaking actually to one in, I believe it was 2020 or 2021, where they were telling me, hey, love what you're doing, would love to get involved, but it was a CMO. But he said, hey, I really need the team to actually focus to bring our e-commerce internally. So you can kind of get an understanding of where some of the luxury brands are at. Another kind of component that is where they're taking steps to ensure they're doing this correctly, because of course from like their branding perspective, they have a certain threshold of where they're at. You've seen a lot of them testing this space, but where I think they'll start kind of taking more of a hold in the market is once they get more comfortable with the whole IP topic. So because they've owned, a lot of these brands have owned their IP for 125 years, now it comes to a point where there's this topic of IP, right? And do they give some of their IP to be able to co-collaborate with their community, or what that looks like? So you are seeing it more and more. We will be seeing this more towards the end of the year and also beginning of next, where there's going to be a lot more opening up to the concept of Web3 and utilizing it, as well as not just looking at it as like a little bit of a testing ground, but getting more and more involved. Of course, there's like Gucci who've been pushing the boundaries in terms of, they have their own Discord, they have Gucci Vault and putting a lot of stuff out there. But a lot of the other brands are kind of wrestling with the topic of IP. They have been for, a couple years now, as there's been this boom of Web3 and NFTs, etc. And then they're also looking at it though more too as a way in which, because they have a lot of VIP customers, and they also want to onboard, and think about a lot of Gen Z or millennials getting understanding of like their company. So they're also thinking about how can they and what kind of solutions will help them bring blockchain more to the background. So that they can focus more of like on this smooth onboarding, because they have to think about their current demographic as well. So it's a technology thing, it's also an IP thing, but they're coming online, they're getting there, so which is exciting.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if anyone else works with a lot of luxury brands, but yeah. I know like Anne talking about like Christie's, there's a luxury component there as well. And Anna, I don't know, also from your standpoint, or Jackie.
A little bit. I mean, I feel like my past life for sure. I came up kind of when I was like the internet-y one. I worked at a company called Carlato, so did sort of PR and strategy for like Marni and Pucci and a bunch of European, I guess, brands. Global, but there's always sort of, I think you have to be a little more, they can't move as fast, they can't, there's more, all of it. I think you kind of covered it all. I think moving forward, the brands and stuff that are participating in the space but are doing collaborations, I think, especially instead of just launching like their own stuff right away, will be the most successful. personally, just because I think that it's a great starting point, and an easy way to be authentic. But yeah, takes them some time.
Full roadmap. We always ask them to, what's the mission that you like? Why are people going there? What kind of community do you want to be building? What is the focus? And to think more about it around that and the long-term goals, and then what can we do incrementally in the short term to be building up to that. So we work with a lot of companies on the strategic side on building out that roadmap to think about it more of like 45-day sprints, opposed to going away, hiding away for 6 months to a year, building something out and launching, because of course we all know that the entire industry and what's happening will change. It's constantly changing day to day. So yeah, I think the more that brands can do incremental steps, and then also with partners as well, partners that are really solving those problems for them, and to not try and think we need to bring everything internally and build internally, but how can we really partner with the right technological partners? So
I love that idea of the 45-day sprint. I mean, and also just helping brands acknowledge that that's okay. And there are ways that you can send a few tweets from your corporate account, for 4 weeks, and that's going to get you so much further than if you'd just done massive R&D, right? Like there are those incremental steps that you can take to show that you're understanding the community, that really are baby steps. So I love that you're doing that. It makes so much sense.
One more question. Branding is really important for brands in Web 2 and Web 3. What are they different when you're considering building a branding for a Web 2 company or Web 3 company? What are the key differences?
Yeah, and I think what Anna was saying too, in terms of what happened in Web 2, or what's still going on in Web 2, and how can we bring all those great points that we've been building up to and bringing that into Web 3, and not forgetting the past as well. Like I think that's something that we also need to consider, and brands need to think about, is like there was a lot of success with Web 2. What's happening with Web 3 and how we can combine those as well. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point, because I think also the topic of I always look at influencers, and looking at the evolution of influencers, and because Web 3 is all about building community, we did kind of go through this kind of evolution with influencers, where it was first all about there was this huge skyrocket of we need the macro influencer who's has 1 million plus followers, but then now brands are starting to realize that it's actually the micro influencers as well who are building this really core following and also helping with conversion. So let's not also forget about kind of what that evolution looked like, and that will help also build out your community, to think about and to look into the past and think about what worked well and what we can bring into Web3 to make it successful.
Yeah, I think because what we've sort of touched on, when you're thinking of launching a Web3 sort of native brand, it's different than if you're a pre-existing brand looking to partner or enter the space. And I think some of the things that have been mentioned around just how much sort of besides who and what you are, right? How much flexibility, I guess, do you want to, intend to offer? Some the most prominent point that we've already seen is how much of sort of the IP of some of your NFTs or your things do you want to release or give to the community, and how much of co-creation. But I think just in general, having some level of where sort of your line of fluidity is, of how much is open to interpretation, I guess, and build, and how much not. Because I do think that you see brands being built a little differently, right? If they're meant to be born sort of Web3 versus pre-existing ones wanting to move into Web3.
Amazing. Just to wrap up our conversation today, we have a lot of aspiring startup founders, fashion designers in our audience today. And could you please give one sentence, some advice to build their brands?
I'll dive in. Give before you get. That's my one. If you're to summarize, give to the community, give to the space, give your time, give your expertise, collaborate, earn the right to build something successful, and show that you genuinely understand the space and what's expected. Yeah.
I would also say, echoing what you just mentioned, Anne, is like looking at building a community that's there with you for the long run. Anything that you can do to not only incentivize, but also have the community fall in love with what you're building. And yeah, again, think about the long run, because we are at the very, very beginning of everything. And so it's important to also think about the community that way, because we do all probably see, a lot of, NFT artists or just NFT launches where a lot of people just want to make money, quick money, and then get out. And so how can you start building a brand that, has the community there for the long run, is what I would say.
I think kind of similarly to those things, I think, besides kind of contributing and listening, like look to where you could sort of plug in or participate without, necessarily being a founder of something brand new. My sort of journey in the space was that, like joining BFF as a founding BFF, being a part of DAOs, and only after a long period of time deciding to now work on launching Qualia, which even is still sort of this distributed ownership structure, because I think there is a lot of opportunities to build something or have a lot of the perks of being sort of a founder or an artist without having to necessarily create something entirely new. And you might find sort of happy serendipities and synchronicities along the way.
You all put this together so perfectly. For me, it's really connect, create, educate, and especially if you're a solo person, find your people. And this is what I see.
Thank you so
as
much,
the most
everyone, for
important
joining
thing,
our
creating these
conversation. It's
communities.
such an insightful conversation we had, right? Okay, that's it for the day. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.